Hello, everybody, and welcome to the STEM space. Today, I'm really excited to have a special guest with me. Dr. Leah Hanes is the CEO of Two Bit Circus Foundation. This is a Los Angeles-based nonprofit that creates STEAM learning experiences for kids that inspire innovation and entrepreneurship by building games, telling stories with technology, and challenging kids to make what they imagine using sustainable materials and STEAM. Welcome to the STEM space.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I love talking about all of this.
Yeah, and I'm excited to kind of just hear about your organization. It looks like you're doing some incredible work and the kids are having an amazing time. So tell us more about your mission.
So really our overall goal is to make educational relevant to the kids and enjoyable for both the teacher and the student. And most kids go to school because they have to, not because they're all excited. I mean, they're excited to see their friends, but they're not excited about what we're teaching or how we're teaching. So our goal is to change that narrative. And we know that kids only remember about 10% of what they read 2 weeks later, but they remember 90% of what they did 2 weeks later. So we do a lot of work with teachers to try and help them move from lecture style to learning by doing. Like, what could you make to demonstrate what you're trying to teach? And I am equal parts educator and environmentalist. I grew up on a farm, so I'm very close to the land. And we gather manufacturers' clean waste so that there's plenty of random material for the kids to prototype with and experiment with. Some of it will go into art projects that are, quite wonderful, but also the majority of it, I would say about 80% of what we do is STEM based, although we use STEAM because art is sometimes the way to introduce someone to the STEM disciplines in a less threatening way. But a young woman, when I first started this job, who was presenting a project we call Light It Up, which is a model home they build we give them one battery and it has to charge 3 different outlets.
Okay.
And so her model home was so elaborate. It had magnets on the refrigerator, curtains on the windows, everything beautiful. And when I asked her what she was doing, she was a senior, what she was going to do next year, she very proudly told me that she was going to Berkeley on a full scholarship to study engineering, and that it was this teacher, Evan Dvorak was his name, that he was the one who helped her see that art is part of every one of those disciplines. And without art, where would we be? Where would we be if someone told Leonardo da Vinci he couldn't mix art with his science?
Right. And I agree. As an educator, I try to provide emotional experiences to my kids, whether it's like the shock factor or the hands-on, want to build something, be creative. But I think that's so important to just hook the kids in before they're even going to listen to all the content. And so is your approach more of like a makerspace where you give them a lot of stuff and some kind of end goal? Can you walk me through that?
Oh, sure. So yes, we build makerspaces in schools. So far, over 400, mostly in Southern California, but a few across the country as well. And we build the makerspace, we fill it with all this random material, and the base model of the makerspace for like an elementary school is a lot of analog tools and glue guns, but just a lot of material and tools that will help them build basic projects. And then as we expand it for middle school and then high school, it's an even more expansive fabrication add-ons. But that's the goal, is to have them spend a portion of every day in a makerspace building something that anchors in what they're learning.
I love that. And what does the learning side look like? So when a teacher is thinking, I have a makerspace, what do I do with it? What advice do you have?
Yeah. Well, we actually, at first we were just putting them in the school, doing the PD and leaving it alone. Now we realize that teachers really want more engagement. So we've developed curriculum that is used in the makerspace. My goal is to now connect the makerspaces so that the students can work on projects to get like in different locations, but together. And that comes from really our whole makerspace program came from a tour I did of a lovely and very expensive private school here in Los Angeles, where they had a complete replica of MIT's Fab Lab in the high school.
Wow.
And when I went on the tour, they were collaborating with a group in Germany and a group in Hong Kong using Google Translates.
Wow.
To communicate. And I was just blown away. But I wanted to sit on the floor and cry because the kids we work with, they're never going to know this exists, let alone have access to it. So I came back to our office and brought the team together and said, what can we do that gives them collaboration experience and experience with working with people who are different from themselves, whether it's across town or around the world. And we came up with our Makerspaces, which are basically mostly made from upcycled materials, filled with upcycled materials, and trying to instill an environmental stewardship to go along with their education so that they think about things like, and I also relate it to, like, our material would otherwise be in the trash. So it is, for the kids, if you make something and completely screw it up, you didn't pay $500 for a kit. You've got material, you can take it apart and try again. So it's a little bit like the rigor that is built into video games.
Mm-hmm.
The same kind of thing in the makerspace. They can try it. It didn't work. Okay, well, let's try this. You had an idea. Let's see if it worked. So we encourage the teachers not to have the answers for the kids, but to help them ask better questions, which I think is also really good training now for interacting with AI, teaching the kids how to ask their questions in order to get the kind of information that they require.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point because you mentioned earlier moving from this lecture-based style of teaching where it's just rote memorization and it's like kids need to become the encyclopedia, when now we have the internet and we can look up any fact, but kids don't because they don't even know what to ask. They don't know how to start. And I think that's such a good point with ChatGPT and other AI tools is they mostly use it to like figure out their homework, right? Copy in the answer, do the quiz, but it can actually be something that's not the enemy of the teacher. I think there's a lot of conversations about cheating, but actually a tool that kids can use. And I use in my business every day. I help write the intro to a podcast. There's so many uses. So we actually had talked before that you came from a conference and we're, in this discussion. So let's just jump into this. Tell me more of your thoughts on AI.
I come to this, the conversation about AI as a dyslexic who grew up in school way before they were testing for that. So I was just considered a slow learner. And it took me until I was in my early 50s to say to myself, okay, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to get graduate degrees. And if it takes me 3 times longer than it takes somebody else, I'm still going to do it. I'm just going to commit to doing it. And it's so much easier now because even the basic things like spell check and Grammarly and the things that can help you with your writing. But now if AI had existed when I was a kid and I could be taught how to give my ideas to AI and ask AI to help me organize the paper that I'm writing and ask, you can do research questions on AI and gather your material. So I think in the classroom, if the teacher gives the assignment and tells the student, if you use AI, you have to show me your progress, what your prompts were, how you worked with AI, and then it's fine. But also have the kids hand in, instead of handing in their paper and the teacher spends the weekend grading them, have the student present their paper to the class. So they get an exercise in public speaking in a very safe little environment and do a Q&A. And if the student learned the material, then we shouldn't care because it levels the playing field for children who are English as a second language, dyslexic kid, anyone who struggles with the linear issues around education can be supported by AI. And it's really on us to teach this generation the ethical use of AI because it's just going to get more and more sophisticated as time goes on. And these kids are going to live their lives accessing it and using it. So I'm happy to see schools starting to embrace it. I do still hear a lot of teachers afraid that kids are going to cheat. Well, they're already going to cheat because they'll just ask Google or Siri or Alexa for answers to what they're, and it's like any technology, bad people will use it for bad, good people use it for good. Like let's nurture a generation of people who want to use it for good. I also think on that topic that having speech and debate for kids in school and using AI to help them would create such empathy, because you have to learn both sides of an argument.
Right.
And right now, don't we need that in our society? The ability to hear someone else, understand where they're coming from. You don't have to agree at the end of the conversation. You just have to understand that that perspective has value, yours has value, and somewhere in the middle, there's probably a solution.
Right. And that's what really draws me to STEAM education is, there's this concern that AI is going to replace education and teachers, and what's the point of school anyway? And it's because the way school used to be taught was, again, this memorization, and these kids, learn all these facts. When this shift towards this project-based learning and creativity, innovation is so good for the kids, makes them want to have fun. Like you said, I've launched rockets with my middle school kids. They want to show up to school that day.
Yeah.
And it's like having to rethink education is what I'm hoping the STEM movement plus AI is going to shake things up and help us be more innovative in ways that support kids for the future.
Agreed.
And so I didn't have a question there, but I have a question now, which is, can I hear more about your story? You mentioned going to grad school. So tell me a little bit of how you started and then ended up here in this STEAM education space.
Yeah, I went to the first year of college as an 18-year-old, and I married my high school sweetheart and left college because it was the late 60s, early 70s, and we weren't, you didn't live together before you got married in those days. You got married, and we were sure that he was the one who was smarter, and he really was, like, all the way through school. He was all A's, I was all C's. So we thought, we will invest in his education and I'll work. So I left school, went to work. He finished his degree, and we didn't last, but it took me, and I had 2 children. So I kept saying, when my kids are done school, I'm going to go back and finish that. I'm going to finish a BA. And that's really what my goal was, just to go back and finish the BA. So those years, really until I was 50, I had this, like, Sunday night was, and even when I liked my job, I was like, it's Sunday. And I realized that for me came from years of mostly elementary school, but some high school too, where everything I handed in came back covered in red ink. And I remember my 9th grade typing teacher saying, "You're wasting my time and yours. Get out of the class." Like, I was slow to learn everything as a kid, in part because there was no consideration of, she's dyslexic, wonder if we could help her with this. But it was, it took me till my 50s. And the first time I went back to enroll in school, I sat in the parking lot for about 20 minutes and turned around and went home. Because it was the first time I said to myself, what if I can't? What if all these years of saying I'm going to go back, what if I can't? What if it's the same for me as it was when I was a kid? So it took me another couple of years to go back to the university and enroll.
Wow.
And then it was, I have my life before that and my life after that are so different, because I had professors who were very nurturing, and who, the first person to say, "I think you might be dyslexic," was my English teacher at university. And she gave me some suggestions that really helped. And she said, one of the benefits of being dyslexic is that you often search for alternatives when you can't come up with the right word or the right organization for the word. And so she started to give me a sense of, like, well, maybe there are some benefits to being who I am.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And I got carried away, and I finished the BA. I did a master's, and then I did a PhD. And I have, I have a huge debt, but I have no regret about it, because my My sense of self changed.
Mm.
My sense of what I could and couldn't do changed. And I attribute that to education and the people who were educating me. And I think teachers today are very different from they were when in the 1950s and 60s. That was really, you were still getting the strap in school when you did something wrong. And there was a lot of humiliation in the classroom because everybody knew if you were the slow one in the class. And I went to a one-room country schoolhouse. So not just my folks knew, everybody in the school knew. So I think now that we have so many options around individualized learning plans, if we could take that early humiliation out of school, I think the mental health issues in our country would really start to subside.
What
Children,
is your doctorate degree in?
ethical decision making and the difference between men and women.
Oh, interesting. That's really a whole other podcast. So then how are you here now? How did you end up with this nonprofit and doing this education work?
Well, I really wanted to be a teacher that was my first goal. I wanted to teach. I just never thought I could. And then once I taught at the university level after I finished my PhD, and I taught where I was a student. And I loved it. I just loved the classroom. But I remember even my own kids who are now in their 40s, one's about to get the AARP newsletter next year. So like their experience at school was so different. My daughter was just a really sweet, easygoing kid. Everybody loved her, and she sort of slid through and didn't get caught at the stuff that she did she shouldn't be doing. My son, which I think is typical of boys, he struggled more. He was a great student. If he sat in class, he didn't have to do any homework. He would remember everything he heard in class. He was a really smart kid, great vocabulary, all this sort of stuff. But he got caught at everything he ever did because everybody's suspicious of the boys. So we keep an eye on them. And I felt that they both, for different reasons, had challenges that could easily have been adjusted if we had individualized learning. My son would have finished school by 9th grade if they had given him that option. He had a very dear friend in a terrible car accident when he was early in the 11th grade, and he asked me if he could pick up the schoolwork for himself and his friend, take it to the hospital, and do that, like help his friend keep up and him. And I said, okay, I made a deal with him. If you give me 3 hours in the morning of just doing your schoolwork, I'll take you to the hospital. You can spend the rest of the time with him. I'll pick you up when it's time to come home. And he did that, and he finished 11th and 12th grade before the end of the 11th grade year. Wow. So if letting him work at his own pace, because he was bored in school. So the things that he did that were problematic were basically, just he needed distractions. He needed to be play. Whereas, in a classroom where everybody's working at their own pace, and if you can also engage them in their own interest, if you have a student who loves baseball, you can teach math through baseball. You can teach geography through baseball, like who started where and what. So there's so many things we could teach through a child's interest if we, first of all, learn what their interest is. And then with AI, it doesn't take the teacher more than 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds to put together an outline for that child's interest based on what they're trying to teach. So I'm a big supporter of that. And I think it was more my kids in school that inspired my desire to get back into education. And so here I am.
I love that. And that reminds me of, I was running an after school program called Space Club. And one of the things I wanted to do was get to know the kids more. We were doing all this cool space stuff, but like, how do I connect with these students? And we came up with what we called Sparks. And we were trying to figure out, like, what is unique about you? What are you really passionate about? So whether it was fishing, origami, cooking, and we would have them make mission patches based on their spark. And then I would take those and try to find either career pathways or, STEM professionals in local area, just somehow to connect them with the STEM program. And so it was really interesting to like talk to a student who's doing origami and say, hey, did you know there's a lot of math involved, in origami? And that's where you can really build some connections beyond, even if we are using AI and like computer-based learning, it's not the same as that person-to-person connection, which I think is so critical.
Oh, and I agree. And it's never going to be, in my opinion, important to eliminate the teacher. It's about finding a way for the teacher to be able to be fully engaged in the classroom without having to try to herd 30 kids at the same time through all the same material. But I think teachers are essential. What we really benefit from, I think, is having the teachers able to spend more time mentoring and coaching each of the students and really connecting and getting to know even the quiet ones who have interests.
Right. And a final question here, if we have teachers listening that are not in your area and are really interested in this idea of a makerspace, but with upcycling, what advice do you have? Should they reach out to local companies? How can they create their own makerspace?
Yeah, that's gathering of the material and building out the makerspaces is a little bit complicated. We've shipped them. We have some in Nashville and some up in Northern California. But gathering the material for the makerspaces, we work with over 100 manufacturers, and we have trucks out there picking up constantly and bringing them. We have a 13,000 square foot warehouse to build the makerspaces now and clear the material. It's all clean material when it comes to us, so we don't take any post-use material. It's all mistakes on the factory room floor or overruns or just like specimen cups, for example, in the medical world have an expiration date. So when they expire and they no longer can be used for their purpose, we take them. And we actually have a world's record for the largest logo made out of specimen cups. I don't think we had a lot of competition, but
that's funny.
But reach out to us, because we also can. There are some organizations around the country that do like resale of things. I don't know about the gathering manufacturers waste and that kind of thing, and we can also ship, and we do trainings online, so it's easy enough to work outside of our geography.
Perfect. I love that. Well, thank you so much with joining me today and sharing your story. And I'm going to ask a final question here of what's the future? Where do you see things going with your organization? Kind of what's the big dream?
So, we have talked for a while about putting together our own charter school that we can use, all of the pedagogy that we've been working with in our own school and use it as a model school for others. So I think that there's an opportunity to do a schooling where the kids only spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours a day on a screen with academics, and that's AI-driven education. Then they spend the balance of their day working in groups on different projects, depending on the focus of what subject they're working on. And that there's a lot of collaboration, that it looks more like a Google headquarters than it does a classroom. We've been teaching the way we've been doing it for a couple hundred years now without a lot of change. And it's really not about tweaking it around the edges anymore, or moving to a circle rather than a line. It's really about overhauling the way we think about how we educate kids. I want kids showing up excited to do what they're going to do. And I think, the environmental stewardship that we try to instill into the makers and inventors of the future is part of the message. And, nothing is a waste here. Everything can have a second life. Your education, you may think it's been a waste up until now. We want to make that change. So, and teachers are our rock stars. I want to work with educators who really are engaged and looking for a better way to engage the students, because nobody's going to do it on their own. We certainly are not able to do it on our own. We have a lot of ideas, and we've had a lot of success. We've built over 400 makerspaces now, and we work with the teachers in those makerspaces. So it's I think the future is kids are active. They're rarely sitting still in school. They're busy, they're active, they're sitting over there in a group planning out their next project, or they're over here in the makerspace gluing something together, building something with 3D modeling. And that's what I see as the view for
Yeah,
the future.
I love that vision. Well, let me know when the school opens. I'll send you my daughters.
Thank you.
Sign up. I'll come teach.
Thank you.
That sounds incredible. Thank you again for joining me, and goodbye.
Wonderful.